There you go. Over to you, Nilu.
Thank you. So we are back into our historical journey of where are the animals. Actually, I bring this example of Ishi here because Ishi's identity really changed based on how he was documented, whether as a museum object, as a museum subject, as a storyteller, or as an individual. And Nord, in his article, he highlights the ethical challenges through the story of Ishi, the ethical challenges of reducing living beings to static representation. And he called for a more dynamic and empathic approach to documentation that acknowledged the agency of entities. This also goes, I think, to animals or any other living thing, which that's take us to the another paper by Mark Koscheyev, which recently he introduces the concept of seeds as a nature culture document. He actually used a famous idea, of Donna Haraway. She is a pioneer in multi-species movement. He used her concepts of nature culture as a nature culture document. He tried to explain that seeds encode genetic information intertwined with cultural practices, our cultural practices like agriculture and science, and it acting as a living document preserved in seed banks. And these seed banks not only document the past and our present in our ecological and cultural knowledge systems, but also it holds the potential for our future exploration and adoption in our biodiversity or in our science. Um, There are many more examples of animals I found in our literature. One of them was for Geir Grenson, which he commented somehow on information practices and knowledge transfer between humans and reindeer herds as a crucial in sustaining the Sami way of life in the northern Norway. There is a very interesting book, which I think some of you might read it, of Bonnie Nardi and Vicky O'Day. It introduces information ecologies. It's mostly about using technology with heart, and it draws on ecological metaphors. They compare information system to ecosystems, where various elements such as people, technology, practices, and their values, it's co-evolve together. And they call librarians as keystone species within these information ecologies. And without librarians, information ecologies could become fragmented or inaccessible, much like an ecosystems that would collapse without its keystone species. Within our LIS pedagogy, I'd like to mention about Jenna Hartle's work on I-Square program. In this project, she uses an art-informed and visual approach, a technique called draw and write techniques, to explore how people visualize the concept of information. In her article with Rio Savolainen, they talked about that surprisingly, not information scientists, the people link information to the natural world by drawing earth, web, and a tree as information metaphors. I think Jenna Hartel is specifically somehow trying to frame multi-species in her teaching as a very accessible, universal, charming, and uplifting, and very fresh in our LIS pedagogy, which there's much to learn from her examples. If you go to, and watch her in videos, in her YouTube channel, you can watch so many of the animals she used to present different ideas in information science, and she got a very good video about multi-species perspective in LIS, which I can share in the chat box with you later. Just one mention, it's not about only the archives and documented studies. We can trace animal turn in human information behavior and human and computer interactions. I want to mention about Tim Garichanas. He is a very famous author in information experience, and which he put it in both fields, I mean, in human computer interaction and information behavior. And his works on information experience continued from by authors like Savolainen, Yu, and Liu, and it brings us to the stage that now we can distinguish between a priori information conception, it's like a predefined informational artifacts, and a posteriori conception of information, as it is any experience of being informed. And this difference highlights about the surface information versus the below the surface information in our, in how we are being influenced by the information flows. And my work on multi-species families builds on this information experience idea, and it shows how interaction with animals emphasize information shaped by living and learning. And it is not like a factual information. It's something that transform two different entities of when they become together. In another example, Christopher Luke, he grounded information in human perception that it's evolved within our embodiment. Um, he shows that the development of information behavior studies as an area is closely tied to our human senses and bodies. And if we cannot sense something, we may struggle to perceive it as information. And he suggests that failing to notice this information is relevant to our field. And he recently, he found a solution in animal turn. He advocates for environmental and life-centered design, asking how we understand information from an animal perspective, and encourage designer to, using different techniques such as view sonas to try to understand how a cat or a dog sense the world. And in that case, we could be able to find more information that is shaping our entire world. Let me, at the end of this journey, let me return to my favorite information scientist, which is, I think you all know, is now Marcia Bates. Bates, in her article, Toward an Integrate Model of Information Searching and Seeking, begins by discussing layers of understanding, emphasizing the needs to include biological perspectives in information science. I think she argues that biological and evolutionary aspects of information seeking have been overlooked, and that's why he called for their integration in the field in those articles, which I think this is the first article he mentioned about animals. And again, in the other one in 2005, Bates introduced her evolutionary framework for information science, viewing information, perception, processing, and storage as part of our the evolution of animals, and then as she considered human as an evolved animal there. And then you all know about her fundamental forms of information. It provides a very comprehensive map of what is information, and she includes animal within that. I think Bates' work really opens the door for this kind of meta theory of multi-species, and I believe that her vision of information is the most inclusive, especially towards the animals. I would like to say that beyond my research, even my background as information professional shaped in a veterinary clinic when I was in Tehran, where I provided like information prescriptions to help the veterinary clients understand their animals' health better. And I personally sense and experience strong bonds with companion animals, particularly during emotional time of losing my pet. And these personal connections really led me to follow this multi-species movement. And many scholars and authors introduced today, I think they also share similar experiences as their interaction. I mean, they have lots of personal interaction with other species, and that in that case that influenced their work. So I can just say multi-species is emerging, and it's dedicated to ethical and compassionate information practices. That it's time to consider the agency of all beings. Which it really fits within our values, I think, as in our education and the research system. What I did as a key example of my dedication to this movement, I organized a panel at 2023 at ACIS, the first panel of multi-species information science with many leading scholars, which was happily accepted my invitation. And we sat there and talked about what multi-species could bring in information science, or whether is that a good place for multi-species to develop within a library information science. It was a very interesting panel, which then later I'm now, as currently writing and editing a book with the same title, which in this book I try to bring all those multi-species from theoretical, methodological, and practical aspects. And I ask people who are interested in this field and thinks there is connection between LIS and animal turn to write for this book as chapter authors. And so many famous scholars has accepted. And I can say that one of the first chapters is written by Marcia Bates, my favorite scholar, and I'm really happy about it. So I'm really grateful for the teams I'm working with. I'm especially grateful for Jenna Harter and many other, even in our university, Dr. Yazdan Mansourian. He is also one of the chapter authors, and I'm really happy from the school and our faculty that they are also supporting me in this area through their available funding opportunities to make this turn as a new perspective within library and information science. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nilu. If you'd like to join me, keep on giving a round of applause to Nilu. I think it was a really interesting and great presentation. Nilu, would you mind unsharing that so we can see everyone? And we are quite intimate number of people here in the Teams room. There are only 17 of us. If you have any questions, I reckon rather than putting it or comments or, point to discuss, I reckon rather than putting it in the chat, just go on mute and speak up. Or are we all just amazed by the presentation? I am. It's quite a new learning for me.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Nilu, if I may say, it's really interesting how you touch on the instinct that it's now, moving into the information behaviors type of thing. And I just, as you were talking, I was just reflecting on my 16 years experience with my current cat at the moment. And it's just a lot that then I can think of, oh, wow. This was actually something. This was information. It was more than just a, simple interaction between human and animal. Yeah. Anyone?
I believe that I got inspired even through my living with companion animals, but it's not the only story of us living with those companion species. I think it's more the story of considering the world around us in a different way, which is also expanding within other terms like indigenous perspectives, or it's really related to how we understand everybody. I mean, everything which they're engaged in the systems we are studying or the systems we are designing.
Yeah, Jenny, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Neela. That's really good. I'm thinking deeply and hard about this now. I'm trying to untangle it in my head. Are you interested in looking at a non-human species as a document, so as a source of information? So, for example, you look at an animal, look how thick its hair is, fur is, and that would tell you something about its climate. Or are you interested in how that animal goes about finding its information and communicating what it knows, or both of those things?
Yeah. Well, this is how expand. I mean, a perspective is. I mean, we can put a perspective through different areas we are working. For myself, I mostly work in information behavior studies and information experience. So for my own study, I will use this perspective through maybe studying more related to human-animal relationships. I mean, or an animal relationship to the world, as you mentioned, how, for example, a dog or cat finds something. But the way I'm working on this perspective is not to have influence on information behavior. It's the way I'm using that one. But I think people in different area could use it in different ways. As you mentioned, for example, how a non-human species could document. They did document the information. Even I recently came across a very interesting article about documenting for non-humans. So, I mean, a human existence is not guaranteed in this world. So what happened after us? After we made all these knowledge systems, when there is no human, how the other than humans are going to use those knowledge systems? Are we ready to document our knowledge for them? I mean, there are very interesting topics we can follow with the multi-species perspectives. But also, I should mention that these perspectives also bring many interesting methodology within our LIS. The methodology which is mostly participatory, very creative, through sensing, through visual studies and sensory methods. So these are very interesting points that multi-species could bring to any area of LIS.
Great, thank you. But another question, if you're studying the information behavioural practices of a bird, how is that not ornithology? Why is that information science?
Yes, that's a very good question. That's what I'm keep thinking of it. That's why I try to conceptualize multi-species, not because I try to conceptualize as a entanglements of human with others, not only the animal behavior, because that's not what information science is about. Human would always be a part of this system. I think if we are going to understand, for example, what Christopher Luke is trying to do, he's going to try to understand how a cat sees the world. He's going to use that to then put it in human information behavior to help us to understand what other kinds of information out there which we are missed. Because people are different. People with disabilities, they might sense the world differently. So if we study the animals, we could then provide better information systems with different life forms. So I mean, it's really important that the question you ask. We are not, I mean, we are in social sciences and humans should always be an important part of it. But we are using the knowledge within the biology, ethology, and other sciences. We can use them in our allies, try to expand our idea and also help them in another way. So how they can use our knowledge about information within biology or within ethology.
I get it. Yeah, thanks, Neela. That's really good.
Thank you.
Quite a few comments there in the chat. Fascinating, thought-provoking, interesting to say the least. And I can see that Kit, you've got your hand up, and next you said you keep thinking about relationship companion animals can have in disability communication. And I guess is that what you're going to talk about more, Kit? Do you want to go on mute?
It's, essentially, I was just thinking about Jane's question of, why is it not ornithology? And then your points, Nilu, about, the fact that even if we are deprioritizing the human is not still removed from the from the conversation. I find it really I absolutely loved your loved your talk, and I'm having word paralysis, but I'm thinking about sort of, say, the whole domestication process of companion animals, and how much of that is not necessarily led for all animals by the humans themselves. Like, there's the truism that cats domesticate themselves, but how. So I'm fascinated in how your research might sort of show communication from first the animal perspective, rather than automatically assuming that humans create the connections that we have with animals around us. Do I have the general idea of?
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think I start with companion species because I think they're most close species to human. It was more easier to understand this perspective from my connection to a dog. But as you mentioned, it's so important that we should try to give more power to them. And if we would be able to give more power to a cat, I mean, as you mentioned, the domestication of cat is much different from a dog. It's just will come I mean, the case is different, but how can I say? I mean, how there are people who, for example, try to understand these ecosystems as humans and the microbes. So there is not much companionship between us and microbes in the meaning we are talking about cats and dogs, but we are really living together and there is some connections. So I think the only way that we could understand this connection is that through our humanity, because we cannot be a dog or a cat or a microbe. We are human. But there are some ways to try to go to the edges of being human. Sometimes act like a cat. Maybe try to be like them. So in that case, we can give more power and perspective from the cat. I mean,
I'm also just, I love that your research takes the idea of the animal as document, or even the person as document, and sort of problematizes that a little bit, because from a disability information studies perspective, I've always found that particular level of categorization interesting in our history, and I love that multi-species research sort of allows you to examine beyond the document, if that makes sense. So
yeah,
I really look forward to knowing more.
And I see there is so many roots to our literature, to our history. There were so many famous animals out there which I think it's time to, to have more recognition for animals in our field, because there have been there in our LIS history.
Okay, so I'm just mindful of the time. I'm sorry, Neelam. I'm just the devil advocate here. We've got two people that with hand up. Yasdan and then Arif. I think those are going to be the two last questions for the day before we close at 1. Yasdan?
Right. Thank you, Nilu, for a wonderful presentation. Basically, regarding the discussion, I just would like to give an example of a similar approach in other disciplines. For example, this book, The Feline Philosophy, is a book that John Gray, British philosopher, recently published, and he's talking about what he learned as a philosopher from his cats, because he had 4 cats in his life. And basically, Nilu can explain it in more detail, but my understanding is we are giving agency to non-human beings. So basically, rather than us looking at them, we let them to give us information. So regarding what Jane said, basically, what is the difference between what we do and, for example, an ecologist will do? In ecology, the scientist is going there to the field to observe. But in this approach, we are giving agency to other beings and let them to guide us, to give us direction, to let us to learn more. So what would you say about that, Nilu? What is your opinion about that?
That's really true. I mean, we are trying to give agency to others because that gives us a new perspective to do our works and to research in LIS. I think if we have any staff from communication studies here, they can confirm that in communication studies, the multi-species has already developed. They have, maybe it's developed some of their theories and they really follow the multi-species. But I wonder why not in library and information science, which it has many historical roots to animals. So as you mentioned, giving agency to others, it's really important in a way that try to see our field differently. Just in case to see if it has any goods or it has no goods for our field, like the embodiment term. But when it happens, some people said it's not related to library and information science. Some people still believe that it's not related to library and information science. But I think the embodied terms has bring some new way of thinking, even new way of doing research and providing new practices in libraries.
Thanks, Nilu. Arif, you put your hand down. Did you still want to
Yeah,
say
because
what you wanted to say?
I'm mindful of time, so I don't want to ask that question. It was just about the methodological perspective. I was just wondering, like, do you think that this area be confined because of the input from the other stakeholder who is involved in this research or in this area? Like, we are just assuming anything from the animal's perspective at the moment. So that was just a simple question. If you would like to answer, otherwise I'll keep in touch with you on email, no problem.
Yeah. No, I think the methodological is a very important point. That's why one of my chapters which I'm working on is methodological. And I'm thinking how LIS could learn about the methodology, existing methodology in multi-species, but also what we can give from the library information science to people who are working in multi-species area. I can say from my own experience, because I joined many of different conferences, which were people from different fields working around, trying to go beyond human, working in different area. And every time when I present my ideas, even present how information science think about the world, everybody was inspired. I mean, they were so interested. I mean, that's how information science can define the relationship between human and animal through that red thread of information. So I think as our relationship to other fields, if we expand this area in library and information science, there is some point of interdisciplinary, some point of impacts, outcomes for people which in other fields. I cannot talk about it right now. Maybe we can talk later, and also because I'm working on the chapter related to this subject. So yeah, we can see what we can share, and I can share about the draft of those chapters with you as well.
I think let's take it as a stay tuned note, Arif. And just the last thing, I think we're heading towards the end of the session. I like the question from Ola, really innovative approach in drawing similarities from the natural world and the breadcrumbs we are able to follow. I think it's a really interesting and spot on comment. Anyway, we're 2 minutes to 1 o'clock, so I guess this is time to close the session. Thank you so much, Nilu. And before I let you go, I would like to also express my thanks huge to my previous co-organizer for the seminar series, Jane. Thank you so much. You educated me a lot on how to run this series, so I really appreciate it. And yeah. And just a reminder, we are still looking for people for the next presentations this year, including next month. So if you are interested to present and share, it doesn't have to be a full presentation of a research outcome. It can be progress of what your work at the moment. Do feel free to send me or Kay or both of us an email, and then we'll follow up from there. Okay, well, without further ado, I should give you your 1 minute back today. Have a lovely afternoon and see you next month. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye.